Welcome to the Dental 18 podcast. We're your hosts, Kiera
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental 18 podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
Two perspectives, one mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental 18 podcast. All right, Dental 18 team, I am so excited. Summer Kassamel is back on the mic with me today. We are going to go into a topic that I think is super hot. It's one of teams and having those conversations, but also I wanted Summer on this one, especially because I personally think that sometimes it's hard, doctors in general, but also female doctors. I think there's a different side of it that I really wanted Summer to bring to the table. So Summer, how are you doing over there today?
I am good. How are you?
Super, super good. I made it sound like you're in the other room, but you're really in like a completely different state from me. So, different time zone and everything. But
I am. I know. Yes.
I know. So we've been chatting it up all day today. And for those of you who haven't heard Summer's story, Summer is one of the most inspirational doctors, leaders that I have met. I think she does a fantastic job of being intentional. This is a little unknown fact. Summer, you were a dental assistant before, weren't you?
I was. I worked as a dental assistant for a couple years. And then actually, little known fact is when I was on crutches, one of 4 times during all my surgeries, I actually sat in the front and learned everything about the front office as well. I answered phones. I scheduled patients. I called insurance companies. I did everything because really I couldn't do anything else when I was on crutches and things like that. So I actually tried to learn every single position within the office to get a better knowledge because when else in life do you get that chance?
Not very often. And I love that you as a doctor know every person's position. So it's not like they can like skirt around and say, I can't do this. And you're like, actually, you can. I have. But also for doctors, I think this is a great one because if you don't get the luxury of having 4 surgeries in your lifetime, Summer can help you out of things that from a doctor's world, things that she knows and impart that knowledge to you as well, because this is coming from a doctor and my perspective today from just a little bit different spin than normal. So are you ready, Summer? Because I'm dying. Okay, I'm super excited. So Summer and I were chatting this morning about, and it's coming because I was working with an office this week. And this office, the doctor is real frustrated. She feels like her team, like she's given that like love and kindness and created a really great workspace. And honestly, this is a doctor that I would love to work for. She is fantastic. I think she just loves her team, but her team like kind of is salty and they'll call out sick all the time. And this doctor, we had a discussion last night and she said, Kiera, I don't know how to like put my foot down without the fear of losing my team, but also like, how do I hold them accountable? So obviously Summer was the one I wanted to chat with about this because I think it's so good. And yes, I'm going on the team podcast with this topic on purpose because I think team members and doctors need to both hear this side because this is a constant thing I see in the bulk of offices. So that's Summer. Give me some thoughts on this and let's just dive right into it today.
Oh, this is a hard one. I'm not going to lie. I think I don't want to say it's necessarily harder for women, business owners, but I think sometimes it can be hard. And I remember, a lot of years ago when a lot of times I was younger than the people, I actually employed. A lot of times I didn't have a lot of knowledge. Sometimes they even had more actual, dental knowledge and experience than I did.
Right.
Maybe not,
like,
you know what I mean?
So like go back to your younger self. Like go back to to the self that didn't know the front office. Like that's where this doctor, she's like, Kiera, I'm handcuffed because I don't know what they even do up there, how to hold them accountable. And if they leave on me, like, what am I going to do if I put my foot down? So those are some of the things like that is a scary spot to be in.
That is a scary spot. But here's what I will say, and I have a doctor in my second location too, that I've been kind of telling him the same thing is, I know that this may not be the popular answer, but I really would employ if doctors can, try to learn as much about those positions, because I do think it's really difficult to talk to team members who feel like you're so distant and removed. And so sometimes you're saying, well, I don't understand why you can't verify all those insurances in one day. What do you mean you're on the phone that long? Well,
it's actually true, you guys, just so you know, it can take all day long.
Depending on the size of office and how many you're in network with, it really can be a really difficult, long job. And so I think one thing I would say is feeling handcuffed like that is kind of, for me, was always a moment of, I've got to take action. And so the minute you can, and yes, does that mean, unfortunately, you may have to put in some hard work of Fridays or whatever to figure out and make some of those calls, or contact people like Kiera who can actually say, hey, this is really how long it's going to take to do these sort of things. But make sure you actually at least know some of the intricacies of these people's jobs, because, I actually even got my hands dirty and I was helping an associate doc as an assistant, which was super enlightening.
I bet.
But as I was there, I forgot even, wow, this is a tough job. And there's a lot of things that go into it, especially with the level of expectation and standards we have. And as doctors, there's things we can be doing to make their jobs a little bit, not easier, that's not the right word, but maybe more consistent. And so I will say, first things first, do have some working knowledge of what their jobs entail. Make sure that they do have consistent expectations that don't constantly change all the time. So I think first and foremost, before you have these crucial conversations, make sure you've laid out the groundwork.
And doctors, we do have online courses in the dental team for office managers, treatment coordinators, schedulers, billers. So you can learn a lot of that. We have training videos, so you can kind of get a snippet, because I don't know, I could think some people listening in could feel like team members could be like, well, my doctor just doesn't ever know my job, so they're not going to get it. And doctors thinking like, how am I ever going to do this? And I don't want any side to feel like you have to be a Summer Kassamel. Summer can't do clinical dentistry anymore. That's not something she can do based on some of the life circumstances with her. But that doesn't mean that you should at least have some knowledge of what's going on. I feel like that knowledge is power for both sides of the equation. And also team members, like I will tell you hands down, I did not know what it was like. I thought in my mind I knew what it was like to run a dental practice. In my mind, I thought doctor was like making a ton of money, and that why on earth, like they're pushing production and like collections, like, come on, you're filthy rich and you're building this like massive mansion, and what is going on, and why do you want me to work harder to pay for your new car that's in the parking lot? Like, honest to goodness, that's what I felt as a team member. But when I owned a practice, I was like, holy shnikes. Like, the doctor is not actually owning that car that's borrowed from their friend, and they're living in an apartment because they can't afford their bills. And to run a practice is very, very, very expensive. And that bottle of Gluma that I just dumped into the Dappin dish, that's like, tons and tons and tons of money, and every single piece to pay your paycheck, to keep the lights on. Those things add up. And I know in my mind, I thought, well, like, yeah, but it's just like the lights, and it's just this, and it's just that. But all those just as pieces, team members, equate to a huge, hefty dollar amount that your doctors don't ever share with you. You don't ever have to take the heat of it. So when you choose not to collect on that patient that walks out the door, your doctor has to figure out how to pay your paycheck while they float money that wasn't collected. And honestly, team members, I don't say this in any other form than love, because I just didn't get it. I didn't know until I was on the other side. But coming from both sides, like you're saying, Summer, I think both sides in this situation can kind of know what it feels like on either side. Like, just because I was super busy doing insurance verification and decided that that was more important than entering the insurance checks, and now I'm stacked up and there's thousands of dollars sitting in my hand, that's kind of a big deal, because I'm still getting a paycheck whether those insurance checks are entered or not, even if that means 20 grand coming out of my doctor's personal savings account to pay my paycheck. These are pieces to both sides of the equation that I really hope team members and doctors can connect on.
Absolutely. And I love that, because you're exactly right. Most of the time, it's just projected thoughts on what the other person's position is like, whether it be the doctor's or a team member's. And a lot of times we just don't know. And so we make decisions based on what knowledge, whether it be limited or not, what knowledge we have. So I will say, kind of going back to your point, I agree. And I, even now, I do just some orthodontics and that's it because I choose to. But what I find is, you're exactly right. Sometimes people don't actually have the flexibility to learn all those jobs to that point. But what I will say is if you can even just get your hands on a couple of those courses, like you said, and at least get some basic knowledge so that you can talk to your team about it with realistic expectations.
Yes.
So I think that you're exactly right. Some people don't have 4 surgeries that put them on crutches that many times to have that. But when you've got some space in your life, try to make some of it useful by getting that knowledge. And then once you have the knowledge, at least a limited amount of knowledge per position, you also have those clear expectations. Then I feel like you can sit down with a team member and have some of those crucial conversations. But sometimes, when it really comes down to it, we've made up a story, whether it be the doctor or a team member, we've kind of made up these stories about unfulfilled expectations that maybe weren't ever true. So when you can get that team member into the, a closed door setting, never obviously in front of other people, you can actually sit with them and say, tell me, what do you think your job entails? What are the most important things about your job? We have every other month, we sit with every single employee in both practices, and we do a performance kind of development program where we actually can sit with them and kind of go through our core values. And at the end, go through their skill set, their motivation, kind of their emotional value. And we sit with them for half hour and make sure, are we all aligned? And sometimes right there in those meetings, we find out that our expectations and what they thought they were doing weren't the same.
Right.
And so both of us had created a story that wasn't even real.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do like to sit with them and actually have that time per person to kind of weed that stuff out. And then once you find out, okay, and this has happened to us where, somebody consistently, as we're going through those, we're like, gosh, they're not wanting to necessarily change. They're not necessarily wanting to kind of be, and change is maybe the wrong word as far as get in alignment.
I think get on board, right? Get on board with where your practice is going. They're rowing with your ship in the same direction, not in a different direction.
Yeah, because our job isn't to change people. Our job is just to try to get people to want to be aligned with the vision and goals of the practice and with their team members. And so when we're sitting with them, a lot of times we can just find out that somebody's just not wanting that level of accountability. They don't want to maintain the standards. They see their other team members kind of consistently striving to be more, and they really don't want to do that. Well, the hardest part is, and the department heads and I, in my practices have really started working on within our departments, having this level of, accountability and conversations. And, there's really 2 choices we're finding out, and that is you get on the bus or you get off the bus. And I don't mean that as harsh as it sounds. It's just that unfortunately you can't be in the middle and complaining. That's just unfortunately not good for anybody. So you either can be on the bus or finding ways to get on the bus to get in alignment and help drive that practice forward and be a part of that amazing team. Or you can get off that bus because really maybe that's not you don't want to be that kind of practice or what have you. But the problem sometimes is that we let people live in the middle, and we let them live in the middle and we let them complain and whine. And the problem is...
Well, and I think it's because we're scared, right? So this office that I was talking about, they're scared that if they put their foot down, their team members will leave. Like, how do you combat that fear? Because that's a real thing. And Summer, you're an Eagle, so there's not a lot of team members up there. Like, how do you combat that fear?
Right. Well, and sometimes it's being creative. Sometimes, you have to figure out, will you be okay with if that person gets off the bus? Because, the problem, and I see this all the time, is there always is this level of fear that keeps us handcuffed to people that, it's not good for either one. And that's really the thing is, I want somebody working for me who wants to be here,
Amen.
and I want people who truly value it and see what we're doing and are like, oh my goodness, yes, the standard's high, but I can't imagine working any place different that doesn't have these kind of standards or teamwork.
And I think as an owner and as a leader, like it's okay to have those expectations. I think so often we assume and project, like you were saying, of, well, they're super overwhelmed, or if I add one more thing to their plate. That is a story with no factual backing. If they've come to you and told you like, hey, I'm super overwhelmed, fantastic, let's find the solution to that. But generally speaking, we create all these different, like, I feel like it's almost like we're justifying to try and keep someone there that we know shouldn't be there, or we're not willing to have that conversation because we're so scared that they're going to leave. But like you said, like I personally am more committed to having a culture of people that I can count on and I can depend on that are going to grow with me the direction I want to go than skirting around and not having that conversation. There's a book called Essentialism, and I love it because they said it is much more efficient with your time and much easier to say no today than it is to say yes and have to say no later. And so like tying that all in, like I'd rather have that, like that conversation's crummy, but it's 36 hours of crumminess as opposed to like years and years. That's in another book I just read called Traction. They said 36 hours of pain for like years and years of happiness. Like, yeah, it's going to be a little crummy to have this conversation. And if that team member walks, guess what? Summer, you and I are both swimming in the boat right now where we've had team members that we have chosen. We've talked to them. We've worked with them. And the reality was we decided if they didn't want to join on our bus and go in the direction we wanted to go, we were okay to let them go. Even though, I drag my tail across the United States of America, working almost 6 days a week consulting offices because I let a consultant go who didn't jive. But I didn't want to micromanage. I didn't want to babysit, and I couldn't have them bailing on me. So I purposely chose. It's been 6 months I've been trying to hire a consultant. But for me, it was more important to go through some pain instead of having the wrong person in my organization.
Right. Well, and the thing that I always love to say too is like a lot of times, here's the thing is they're great people. They really are. Like, they're fantastic people. They're just not right for what you're trying to do. And that's okay. Because I think it's not actually a kind gesture to keep somebody on who really would probably be better suited in a practice that's different or what have you, or not even in that field anymore at all. Who knows? But
I agree. Like let them have their dream life. They can't be enjoying coming to work every single day, feeling like they're failing as opposed to winning. And so really I think it's important to not to listen to the stories that you're wanting to. Today I was talking to Kaylee. We're chatting about somebody that is a potential, and she's like, well, Kiera, they're doing better this week. And I was like, yeah, but for the last 3 weeks, they've done nothing. So their better is like they went from a 1 to a 2, but I don't want a 2 on my boat. I want a 10, like just because they did better. And like, but obviously don't go to the chopping block and team members don't feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to chop us. No, like you said, Summer, it's sitting down with that person one-on-one, having those check-ins with that person every single month or every 2 months to make sure that they're headed in the right direction, not being afraid of those conversations, and then determining what you're committed to. And it sounds like, if I was to guess, Summer, it sounds like you're more committed to culture and people that are on the bus that are driving the direction you want to go, as opposed to being shackled to team members.
That definitely is. And sometimes it's hard, right? I've had predicaments where literally, we are down a person or two and we're all having to figure out ways to get on the bus. But what I love about, getting, everything to get taken care of. But what I love about the teams that I have in both offices is they are so willing to rise up those A-team players and say, you know what, I'd rather get the right person on to work with and have a couple months of it being uncomfortable versus just throwing somebody in and having it be, a horrible fit. And that's something I will say, Kiera, is we definitely onboard differently now than I did even 5 or 10 years ago. We onboard people with a 30, 60, 90 day expectation. So within that first 90 days, they've kind of figured out who we were. Even in the beginning interviews, they know what we're about and our expectations. But then in that first 90 days, there's no doubt kind of who we are, where we're going, and what we expect. We also have those conversations right from the get-go so that these people are aware, we're not saying this to be mean whatsoever. We just want to make sure that you are confident in fulfilling those expectations right out of the gate as much as possible.
Remember that essentialism thing that we talked about. If you set the expectation clear at the beginning, this is what they're walking into. They have no idea that maybe 2 years ago, it didn't used to look like this. All they know is what we know today and what they can expect. And I love that because we also do the 30, 60, 90 scorecards, and we have those throughout all the dental aid team for you, because I think it just makes it way easier for them to know what's expected of them from the get-go. But Summer, I am, because I know you have to run and I need to run, I do want to like quick fire at you of this doctor. Let's say you've had turnover in your practice. This is your third office manager in a year and a half of ownership. So third office manager, the first one left due to personal circumstances. The second one wasn't super trained. There's not a lot of people around you. The hardest thing like in your area to hire from. So you're really scared if these team members leave you. You're super scared. And so you have team members who are calling out sick all the time. They're not showing up. They're not entering insurance checks. Insurance verification is not being done. You get a lot of complaining, a lot of drama in the office. And you know that there's about 3 key players that are kind of the driving forces of this. What would you recommend to this female doctor who has this as a serious thing? What would you do in that circumstance? From like, what would you do?
Well, and I will say it's so easy when you're sitting outside of it.
Of course.
To give, so I've been sitting in the middle of it. And sometimes you have to have strategy plays a little bit, of course, to figure out how can you get by in certain situations with less than ideal. I will say one thing is I almost always have ads running for positions, which, it does cost me money, but I always am looking for, are there new A-team players? I do look outside the box. I don't have to have somebody who is trained in specific positions, because we've now gotten our onboarding packets to where they're pretty systematized. So I always keep ads out. I always have somebody, looking for those A-team players. Because that gives me some confidence that if I can stack the bench at certain times, then if need be, if you go down a player or two, you still have some great A-team players there that can help rebuild. It's really hard when your practice is built on C-level players to figure out where to go. So first things first, getting those ads out and really trying to comb the community for potential people that could be really amazing players, just not necessarily dental knowledge. That I actually started a dental assisting school for that very reason. But if you don't want to start a school, obviously, there's ways that you can find great players in all different sorts of places. So I think for her, the thing that became hard for me, and I was literally in her shoes, is, and a quote that stands out to me is empowerment without expectations can lead to entitlement. And I think that often we empower, we give, and really at the end of it, there was no real accountability or expectations. And so an entitlement grows, and it's not necessarily the team's fault or anything like that. It just happens. And for her, what's hard is she now has to figure out a way to reset baseline and set those accountabilities and expectations with either new team members or coach the ones she has, and then figure out a way, because what's hard is when you're the boss trying to make everybody happy, your whole time and creative space is used to figure out how to make people happy. And that's just not a great use of anybody's time. And as the doctor or team members or whatever, nobody's responsible for making somebody else happy. That's really up to the person themselves. We can create a conducive environment. We can try to be as generous as possible. We can come to work with positive attitudes and be great leaders, but the rest of it falls on the team member themselves to rise up. And so I think for this doctor, one, it would be to examine her systems, her expectations, and her accountability measures. Make sure that those are ironclad and in there from the get-go, from day one. Set up a 30, 60, 90 kind of structure so that people know the direction they're heading all the time. And really make certain that if you're going to give rewards, there's expectation and accountability put on them, so that at the end, nobody's resentful. That's the goal. Absolutely. And I love what you said about that. Like, say your line again about empowerment and entitlement. So, I'm certain I read this, and I apologize if I'm not quoting it fully right, but I think it's something along the lines, if you empower people without accountability or expectations, it leads to entitlement.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good, right? Like I said, I'd love to take credit, but I can't. I know I'm sure I stole that from somewhere.
No, that's great, because I love that. Because also team members, like, you're probably hearing this and like, oh, this doctor, but I'll tell you, Summer's culture and the things she does for her team, yes, she is one of my dearest friends, but at the same time, team members, like, Summer provides an amazing job. She allows her teams to grow. She took her team to Jamaica. She has accountability check-ins. She pays her team ridiculously well. Like, Summer is an incredible boss, but at the same time, she expects a lot from her team. It is okay to expect things from your team. And when they're not performing, it is okay to have that conversation with them. When people call out sick for work, I remember, I will tell you point blank, I had a doctor tell me, Kiera, if you value your job, you will show up to work. And I remember I had to think about it. Am I really sick enough that I need to go get a doctor's note? Or am I just calling out sick because I don't want to go to work and I just don't feel great? Guess what? Your doctor doesn't feel super great. They have a baby or they have family members or all these different things. And if they called out sick, guess what? You don't have a job. Well, if you call out sick or other things, I'm not saying we're these like mean doctors or owners that you have to show up. But the bottom line is you do put your office in a bind when you don't show up, just like if your doctor didn't show. So it's like, I think it is perfectly okay for team members to hold themselves as accountable as they hold their doctor. Team members, you hold your doctor accountable to show up to work to give you a job. You have that expectation. If they don't show up, guess what? You still get to go to work and get paid. But I think also for doctors, it is okay and be okay to have those conversations. Like you said, have those accountability check-ins. And if the team member is not in a line with you, beautiful. It might be time to part ways. Have those ads out running. Team members, that does not mean we're always trying to hire and fire. It just means if we're hiring because we're growing into that capacity and we're always looking for the best people to join our team because we know we'll grow to that position with the best team members in place. But team members, like, look at your doctors, look at yourself, and like, doctors, don't be afraid to have these quote unquote hard conversations. And I hate hard conversation because in your mind, you think it has to be hard and it has to be draining and exhausting and they're crying and I'm exhausted. And it's like, no, it's just a conversation. You as a doctor, as an owner, as an office manager are 100% expected to hold your team to their job. If their job is to fill the schedule and they don't do it, they need to explain that to you. And that is perfectly okay to hold your team accountable. The empowerment without accountability leads to entitlement. And I think that that is the best thing to leave. Summer, are there any other additional notes? Because I think that is solid of how to help your teams have those conversations.
No, I'm not saying it's easy. So please don't let anybody misconstrue that. I think it can be. And I will tell you that the thing I will say is in the beginning, it does feel hard. I promise you, the more you have those conversations, they become part of your vernacular as a culture. And now we have them all the time without even thinking. So it does become something that's just, I don't know if it's easy, but it becomes something that's more fluent to your culture. I think
instead of it being easy, it becomes common jargon. Just like the first day of trying to do fluoride every day for your hygienist probably wasn't super great, but then it becomes common. The first day you tracked your treatment tracker, it probably felt like you're doing a crazy thing. The first time you do a workout, the first time we try something new, it doesn't feel super great the first time because it's new and it's uncomfortable and it's awkward. But the more you do it, the more it just becomes common. And when it becomes common, it becomes easier. And then you're not stressed about having these conversations. The first couple ones, probably super hard. But after that, you're set free because you're no longer shackled because you now know how to have these conversations. And team members, same thing for you. You can talk to your doctors.
Absolutely.
You can talk to your doctors. You can utilize these tools same way, but also make sure you're checking yourself. And team members, like you being those A-team members that give your all of all, and have your doctors give back. Like, have your doctors listen to this podcast. There are doctors like Summer and Mark and so many other doctors on here. And maybe they just don't even have the tools to help out. And you team members can set the trend of accountability check-ins where you know what your doctor thinks and you can give feedback that way to grow and elevate, to make sure you are giving your all of all and they're doing the same thing. And together you guys can have a seamless practice.
Absolutely.
All right, Summer Kassamel, as always, it was a pleasure. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for joining us. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental A Team podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.